Hey everyone, you're here with Mark Bawa at PerfectGardens.com. So today we got a great question from Mark. He is battling heat in SoCal, and even in the winter months, even as he references the video when we're talking about positive versus negative pressure, and he talks about tent, fan, light, then out of the room with a small inlet fan. So he's doing all the right things, right? He even has an inlet fan helping push the main fan. So sometimes these are inline fans are called booster fans. They're the cheaper, inexpensive fans, not the higher can fans that you normally get, helping to push along to the outside. Then for an intake, I have inside the tent another big fan sucks air in from a long room, but I can't get temps down. Okay, so in this video, we're going to get into tents, positives, negatives. We're going to get into when should I convert over from a grow tent into a actual grow room and everything along those lines.
Are you tired of getting crappy advice from your local hydroponics store? Or having to search all over forums to get advice that only takes you in different directions than solving your immediate problem? Well, join our membership for $50 a month. You get direct access to me. We'll connect on WhatsApp app. And just like this gentleman that started back in July with us, as problems arise, we are here for you.
Before we get into it, I want to show you one of our wholesalers. One of the wholesalers right here is DL Wholesale. It's actually my main supplier I can get all stuff from. If anyone is my member on our $50 membership, go ahead and hit me up, or just literally just go to this website and check out all the products they have here. I really don't care if I'm making $10 on the order, genuinely. If you're a member, I will hook you guys up. Come check out all the products here. Save me time. I can only ship to Canada and the US. Go through here, select all the things you might think you want. Definitely these orders have to be a little bit larger than just $5 or $10. They normally have to be around $200, $300 to meet minimum shipping requirements. And there normally is a 2 to 3 week wait time, including shipping. So meeting those terms, I'll be able to hook you guys up. Also, our website, PerfectGardens.com, will be going through a revamp and will be reflecting this website in the near future. So just go to this website, send us an email at admin@perfectgardens, and we can start figuring out what you guys need. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into one deal and also the secret garden. A lot of these one deal grow tents are the normal grow tents you'll purchase. They go all the way from like 18 inches by 18 inches by 5 feet tall, or 2 foot by 2 foot, as you can see, by 4.5 feet tall, all the way up to a 10 by 10 grow room tent. The issue with some of these tents, though, is they don't really have the highest quality roofs. They really can only support a light, a fan, some ducking. Although, because these lights are getting a lot more powerful and heavier, some of these tents' roofs really aren't the best for it. They'll hold up and they'll hold, but when you get up there and you see, like, if you hang a heavy LED on one of these lights, on one of these types of hoods, you'll be like, maybe I should put in a support beam in the center to kind of hold these things up. Anyone that's growing in a tent, you'll realize how fast heat will accumulate in these tents, and this is exactly what Mark is going through, right? Mark is going through heat problems because, first off, he lives in SoCal. He's in the winter, and SoCal's hot, and even if he's bringing air in from another room in his house or in from the outside, it's still not cool enough, because when you really think about it, think about these lights. And I don't care what people say about LEDs, they don't create any light. Yes, they do create lights. If you look at all of these LEDs, they all have fans on them. Why do they have fans? It's because they're blowing heat away from their computer chips so they don't explode or melt down under heat. Yeah, they don't have the level of heat the HIDs or metal highlights specifically. I mean, there is a dramatic difference in heat, although LED heat will accumulate over time in these tents and create not the best growing environment for these tents. For the most part, though, most of us that are just trying to get our feet wet, we're going to be going into a hydroponic store and normally walking out with a 4x4 or a 5x5 grow tent, an HID system, maybe an LED, a couple pot and some nutrients, and that's going to be pretty much our setup. We might have a fan, an oscillating fan, but a lot of us, we're not going to be buying the $300 can fan. We're just not really within that budget. And the HID system that we purchased, if you're smart about it, you would be going with a dimmable 600 watt ballast. Reason why, again, is because of heat accumulation, and because, once again, LEDs, we're talking about even a small one, we might be talking about $500 to $1,000. The HID system, you can walk out of a hydroponic store with a full light ballast hood setup, maybe $200. So there is a dramatic difference in pricing when you initially get started. Even with the old school equipment, a lot of people will still go with that literally just because of pricing. But then when they get started and start hooking everything up, they start running into other issues: heat, light stress, other things. So that's why I always, when people are buying tents, I'm always recommending a dimmable ballast, 600 watt minimum. And if you're putting an LED, make sure that it has a dimming feature to help control heat issues throughout the year. Other things I like about these tents is that they're relatively reasonable in price. If you were to go and build something yourself, which would include 2x4s at least, some reinforcing 2x4s, also the equipment, right? A hammer, nails, and you think also about the noise it would take to build something like that and then bring it into your house or your apartment or wherever you're at, it's not really feasible to do all that stuff for the most part. So these tents are incredibly valuable because you could very easily carry in a box and then within 5 minutes you have a grow room setup. Relatively, the most important thing is controlling the light cycle. And that's what this tent does. It reflects the light and it controls the light cycle so that you can go from vegetative growth to flowering. It also helps create a security or protective layer just in case you have dogs or cats or kids and other stuff, which I never recommend to be growing when you have kids around, although it is what it is. That's what ends up happening for the most part. Normally, though, when you kind of meet your match and you kind of realize like, oh, wow, this tent really is working out, right? And so you grow a little bit of product, unload it, and you're like, wow, this really is working out. I need to grow more. And so you might want to grow in the 10 by 10 from scaling up from a 4 by 4, although you remember the roof and you remember that it had issues with holding the LEDs, but you really want to grow another 2 lights or another 4 lights in your grow room. So you don't really want to use these types of grow tents. So let's say you check out the Secret Garden, which I actually really like this brand. This brand's phenomenal. It has much more heavier duty equipment. Most of these tents are higher up, they're 6 foot, maybe 7 foot. They have extension kits, different things like that. And you're able to put much more heavier duty equipment. In addition to the Secret Garden jardines, they also customize your tents from propagation tents to unique, being able to have like a grow room and then a propagation, so you kind of have a chance to be able to grow year round in a sense. So let's say you have like a small 2 plants down here, you're cloning off of them, you end up cloning up here, and then you take those few plants, 2, 3, 4 plants, and then you grow right here. And so now you're able to have a continuous cycle all set up in one grow tent. And I'll pull this up to just make it a little easier to see. And before you know it, you can be extremely creative. And as you can see, the hoods and where to hook the fans into, it's much more heavier duty. Although, as you start to get into these bigger rooms, you'll start to see that these things begin to cost a little bit more, right? So you have a 3.5 foot by 2 foot by 5 foot, and that's $230. Let's go over here to the O'Neill. And you basically, the same size, a 2 by 4, and this one is what, a 4 by 2. Okay, so this one right here is $140. So you can really see the difference in price. It's roughly the same size, half the price, but because of much more heavier duty equipment, bars, metal, roof, all that stuff, it's going to cost you more. Let's say you wanted to go into a bigger room, the tent size, right? When you buy these grow tents, you can buy ones that go from 10 by 12, 20 by 12s by 8, and these are $3,000. And when you think about it for a second, you're like, wow, this is really expensive. This is $3,000. Well, it's actually not that expensive when you really consider everything that you're kind of getting in this tent setup. You're getting the ability to have walls, so you have access to your entire crop. You have a nice large door. You have higher ceilings. You have a reinforced roofs to be able to hold the weight of the lights. And once again, if you don't want everyone to know what you're doing, you kind of have neighbors. You have to be able to set stuff up quietly and get up and running. So these grow tents, for the price, I actually think are phenomenal. And their capabilities, you really can't beat it. Although, if you have the space and you have your own ability to be creative with a hammer and some nails, you can kind of start to do stuff on your own. You might want to get away from the grow tents, because most of us our grow rooms will begin to look like this. The plants will begin to get overgrown, and the lights will begin to get too hot. And just like how Mark over here is having heat problems, we begin to have to incorporate larger equipment or other equipment in our grow room, like dehumidifiers and air conditioners, to help control the air that is in the grow room, because this air is the air that is affecting the plant. If it's too hot or dry, it's going to be drying out the leaves, which if you dry out the leaves, the stoma shut down, photosynthesis begins to shut down. And because obviously we were able to grow our first crop and turn it, and we're still excited with that, and we know we can make money in the industry, we know that investing in this grow room a little bit more might actually be the solution to all of our problems. Although, once again, we're running into the issue that the tent is too small. So what do we do, right? Do we go and buy a larger tent, or do we actually invest the money into our own grow room? And this is where I begin to recommend to clients is I like to ask them, how much do you want to grow? Or what's your expectation? Do you want to grow 2 pounds, 4 pounds, 6 pounds? Do you want to grow that annually? Do you want to grow it quarterly? Do you want to make this a business? Do you want to make it personal? And I normally really like to even ask my clients why they got into the business in the first place. Like, what was their desire initially? Because I try to also bring people back to their original starting point. And the reason why I do this is because a lot of times people will get into growing and they'll grow a few plants, get a little bit of success, and before you know it, when they initially just started getting into the industry just to grow a few plants for themselves, they now want to start growing more plants because they see the business side of this industry. I mean, come on, obviously we did, right? We knew there was money and we wanted to go full-fledged in the industry, and that's why we ended up making the decisions we made, was risk versus reward, and we decided to risk it for the reward. So when you look at your own grow room, the nice thing about your own grow room is that if you're going to dedicate the entire room, you already have the walls built, right? And in this situation, if you don't have to build or buy the grow room itself, and at times you might have to build it, so you're going to have costs of 2x4s, but normally a 2x4 by 8 feet or 10 feet might be $6, $8. And you have reinforcing walls depending on the size and everything. You might be spending $500 in wood and some styrofoam for walling, so you might end up being able to build your own grow room with a semi-decent structure for $1,000, $1,500, and we're talking like a 10 by 10 grow room, 10 by 15 grow room. And you might not even have to build all the rooms. You might have 2 rooms that are already there, and you might end up just adding 2 more walls, which again, you have some additional savings. So with that savings, instead of putting it into your grow tent, you decide to do the smart thing, and you decide to reinvest it into running safer electricity, right? Because these hoods, we're talking about the heat. If you go out in the world and you look at high-intensity discharge lights, you're only going to see these lights in the light poles that are outside. Rarely will you ever see high-intensity discharge lights inside, yet we decide to run 20, 50, 100 light grow rooms indoors with all this heat. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we're using industrial lights for residential homes. It's a huge safety issue, but I'm not going to be a hypocrite. Although you take the money that you saved and you reinvest it into your grow room. You run the nice lines, you make sure there's dedicated power running off your sub panel box, running to your relay systems. If you haven't checked out my video talking about relay systems and sub panel boxes, I highly recommend you do so because it does talk about everything I'm kind of discussing right now in more detail. Although with the dedicated sub panel box and relay box, those two things end up becoming the brain to your room, right? And because you're able to run the wiring, let's say the main sub panel boxes outside, and you're able to hook up your ballasts outside, you're able to start to get more creative on being able to set up your grow room and help control the heat issues. Just like how Mark is starting to have issues with his heat because he's pulling air in, and I'm making an assumption, I hope I'm right on this, but he's pulling air in, most likely from his air in another room, but it's not cold enough, or he might be bringing air in from outside, and depending upon the day, he might have some good days where the temperature is working with him, but then he might have some bad days. Even if he's running the lights at night and doing everything right, once again, still having some issues. So when you build your own grow room, and let's say you're doing all the right things, you're putting the electricity panels outside your grow room, you're putting the ballasts outside your grow room, so they're putting the ballasts inside. I would recommend to put it outside, or even have a enclosed system with its own air system helping to keep the ballasts if you're running HID systems. Because once again, how did we grow all those plants? We were shuffling through 10,000 plants every 2 months for 4 years. How did we run through all these plants and keep healthy in our grow room? And we did that by creating a consistent grow environment as much as possible. And so we did our best to remove anything that was adding or contributing to altering the grow room environment. Would separate all these things out. Ballasts, we had very unique air system that was bringing air in and cooling down all of our hoods. Again, even how we controlled the humidity with our air conditioner, which is a very unique story, and I don't get into those details too heavily unless you're a client. But the way how we controlled these things, and because how we built out the room, we were able to eliminate a lot of problems before they ever even occurred. And then as we were able to set up our growing room, we were able to maximize our return on investment per square inch of your grow room. And that's what you as growers really have to be thinking about. Your real estate in your grow room. Every single square inch from where those flowers start to where they develop, I mean, every square inch, when you think on a vertical square inch of space, could be hundreds of dollars in your grow room per square inch. And as it goes up from the bottom of the stems up to the top of the colas, those could be hundreds of dollars per square inch of investment money or return on investments. So these grow rooms, as you're setting these facilities up and thinking out all the problems, become an absolutely critical step to becoming more competitive in this industry. For Mark, I personally, just listening to him, I don't think he's going to be able to control his temperature. And him not controlling his temperature, he's probably going to be running into spider mite issues, bug issues. The plants will most likely be a little more brittle. The flower will be dried out at the end of his crop, and it's not going to be most likely competitive enough for his area, especially SoCal. SoCal has a lot of amazing indoor growers, and he has to really be doing everything to the best of his ability to be competitive to his market. I'm not saying he won't be able to get rid of his crop, because it always sells. It's something about cannabis I've realized over the years. It always sells. I'm just saying the amount of time and energy he puts to his crop, he probably won't be getting enough of a return if he's trying to make this a business. If he's just doing it for personal, I would go back to the question why he really wants to do this. If he is just doing it for personal, then he probably needs to reduce the amount of infrastructure he has, or his equipment he has in his grow room. If he's just trying to grow a pound for his own personal use, then I would probably recommend to reduce the size of his light, reduce the amount of plants he's growing, and by reducing the size of his operation, he's going to be able to get control over his environment, and he won't need to spend more money to run the necessary equipment to create the artificial grow environment necessary to max out the ROI and the potential of these plants. Although if he is doing this for business, he might be at the point where I have to ask him, is it worth it for you to potentially build your own grow room and get away from a grow tent? He might have obviously some confinement issues, as we already discussed in the beginning of this video. He can't make noise, he has neighbors, whatever. Although if he's still adamant about growing bigger or fixing this issue, and I'm telling him, listen, you can't do this without an air conditioner. And if you try to put an air conditioner into the grow tent, anyone that's ever tried to do this, you won't be able to do it with the grow tent he has right now. If he's already having heat issues, who knows how many plants he has in his grow room already. He probably doesn't have the size grow tent to be able to fit a air conditioner into his grow tent. You know, those stand AC, those stand 12,000 BTU air conditioners that normally have two 4-inch lines coming out for one inlet, one outlet type situation. Because if he wants to bring in these AC units, they might be running on 220 power. They might need a 20 amp circuit breaker. They might just need more infrastructure. And if he doesn't want to, I'm not talking about Mark, I'm just talking about, let's say, just some random person growing. If they want control of the grow room, but they don't want to spend the money to create that artificial grow environment by bringing in dedicated electricity, then they start to run the risk of maybe getting busted, right? How does you get busted? Well, if you start popping circuit breakers, maybe you have an old house, maybe you're jerry-rigging stuff, who knows what you're doing? Well, if you start to attract unnecessary attention where a fire gets started, where tons of things happen all the time, people are just trying to make money as cheap as possible and fires start out, whatever. So the next question I might ask him would be, well, maybe where you're living or where you're trying to grow isn't the best spot. And so once again, I might try to get someone to slow down, and instead of spending more money on building a grow room, I might encourage them to save that money and get out the location where they're at and go to a location where they can grow to the level of where they want to grow without dealing with the confinements of your current growing environment. Guys and ladies, I'm not trying to be overcomplicated with this situation. Although if you're dropping $10,000, $15,000 on a grow room with all this light and equipment and energy and time, and a lot of you guys might be thinking, I don't spend that much money on my plants. Guys, how much do you get paid per hour for your job? Whatever job you're working, $15, $20 an hour. Well, how much time do you spend in your grow room? Then when you accumulate it with the lights and tints and setup, and then the time you invest to build your grow room, then the time you invest to grow your plants, then the time you invest to sell your product, then the time you invest to educate yourself on how to do all of this, guys, yes, you've spent $10,000 to $20,000 in sweat equity, stress, whatever. And if you're going to be dedicating that much money to something, I would highly recommend you do it to the best of your ability and treat it as a business. Be methodical around your decision making. Don't have the addict mentality. Don't just keep throwing up more tents and growing more plants and forcing it to happen. Be methodical. If you're willing to find the money, $5,000 to buy a tent and buy all the lights and buy the soil and the fertilizer and everything you need to grow another tent, maybe you should just slow your roll and think about what you could do to just build the infrastructure you need day one and then max it out from there. I hope this video was helpful on different thought processes on whether you should stay in the grow tent or whether you should begin to think about setting up your own grow room. Thank you very much. Please like, share, and subscribe.